And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those of you still on the fence figuring things out, welcome back to another episode of Derailed, courtesy of Arcaicskidz. I'm, of course, your host, Arcaicskidz, and we have the Libertarian In Chief. What's up, Todd?
How are you, sir? Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, I'm so excited about this. I've been chasing you for a while. So, what's going on? Why don't you tell everyone who you are, what you're about?
Yeah, sure. My name is Todd Hagopian. I am the Libertarian In Chief on Twitter. I got my start in libertarianism probably about 5 years ago. I was pretty hardcore Republican for a good long time. And about 2010, started leaning more towards Liberty Republican. And then during the 2016, early on in the election, decided at that point, like the party had just drifted too far away. I announced I was moving to libertarianism, endorsed Austin Peterson in the primary, who, of course, lost to Gary Johnson. And then ever since then, I've been a member of the Libertarian Party, mostly online for a few years due to some health issues with my son. And then just this last 2 or 3 years here, I've gotten quite a bit more involved, especially in the Oklahoma Party and now nationally.
Nice. You have a podcast out there that you do?
Yes, sir.
Chiefs Chats, is that what it's called?
Yep, Chief Chats. It was something I wanted to do for a long time, and it was going to be a solo podcast where I just came on and basically talked for 5 minutes about an issue and this and that. And I really wanted to do it, never understood the technology or anything. And then Kevin Hobby, who is now the chair of the Oklahoma Party, came to me and he's like, he wanted to do a podcast. And I said, listen, I got this whole thing set up already. I got all the music, I got the graphics, I just don't know how to do it. Let's do it together. And so we ended up coming up with Chief Chats, and we were shocked, at the good. I mean, obviously in the libertarian world, people are much easier to get on your show. Like they're happy to talk to you and they come on, but we've been shocked. We've gotten some great guests. We've gotten some good views, gotten some really fun conversations. Yeah, it's been great so far.
Nice. And for any of you watching this, he just had a Playboy Play Bunny. Like, so, I'm just saying, if you're interested,
That's right.
So you are the Libertarian In Chief. You do these fun things on Twitter where you say, ask me anything. I generally try to ask you something ridiculous when you do that. What's the most ridiculous question you've been asked?
Oh, man. I get asked, there's just all kinds of off the wall crap about, I get asked sexual positions. I get asked all this stuff. I try and just answer whatever they ask. And, if it's completely disrespectful, I get away from it, but I just try to, roll with the punches, and people seem to like banter back and forth. And I try and stay away from the math problems that people throw at me. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff gets a little annoying, but
that's funny. There's no way I'd ever do that because I don't want to talk to people that much.
Yeah, exactly.
The majority of my Twitters don't talk to me. I'm just here to annoy people.
I started them because I ran for LNC chair really briefly in 2019, going into the 2020 election. And so I started doing them, and we were, getting 40 to 100, questions a session, and people really liked it. So I just kind of kept it going. I probably get closer to about 50 now. I don't get up to 100 too often because I'm not running for anything. It's just mostly people come in and they're interested in libertarianism, and it's a good way to get some questions answered. I try and let people know, I'm not the end all be all of libertarians. There's certain things I disagree with. And, if you hate some of my answers, talk to some other libertarians. You're going to find folks that answer it the way you want. So.
Yeah, no, I get that. I run into that once in a while where people are like, wow, that's a bad libertarian answer. And I'm like, okay, guess I'm a bad libertarian. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
So Canada's become a full police state. Got any thoughts?
Yeah, tell me. You were mentioning this before, so tell me what's going on.
So they're I don't know what they call them or whatever, but they had this video that they put out that basically says, like, if you leave your house and you don't have a good reason, yeah, you go into a gulag, bro. Like that's it. Like there's no other options for you. Like, and I'm like, okay, do not let them disarm you in America. Because this is the crap they can pull. Like,
see, in China, they just, cement you in or something to your house.
Yeah, they just weld you in your house. You're fine. Don't worry about it. And then when they open the doors and they're all like starved to death, they're like, no, they just had the flu.
Yeah, exactly. Guess you're cured now.
Yeah, so I saw that video and I tweeted it out and I said, coming to an America near you.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this like since the lockdown started. I'm like, whatever's going on in these awful places, I'm like, no, this is coming. And they're like, no, it's not. Yeah. Every time I've been right. I am yet to fail. So I can only imagine. And what's funny about it is that I believe it's New York State. Their Senate passed some nonsense bill that like the governor can just take you, like I guess, to a like an internment camp is the better way to put it. If you have whatever, like an infectious disease that can affect the public. Now it hasn't fully passed through New York, but I'm like, dude, this shit's coming here. Like, when are you people gonna wake up?
Yeah, I know people. There's been all kinds of controversy in the party about certain tweets and whatnot, but the theme of all those tweets were the same, and it's that we're creating second-class citizens, and once that mindset's in place, things like this can happen a whole lot easier, than they do today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually terrifying, but it's also true. So Sleepy Joe Biden is not even meeting the world leaders that come to the White House now. Do you find that odd?
I think it's a little bit odd. He doesn't talk to the American people either. You're kind of like, what is he doing all day? And
Well, he's snapping. He's tired. Yeah. He's old. Like, it's not the first time we've had a president that was like not really the president. Like, I actually got in an argument with someone the other day about, they were like, Abraham Lincoln was the best president, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, if you even knew any, like, you obviously don't know history. Because he was absolutely an awful human being. Like, doesn't matter. What else? Okay. I had one more question. I don't remember what it was, and then we'll just like talk about whatever. I don't care. Shit. Well, there we go. I don't remember. So this is what happens when you don't write things down.
Yeah.
I should start a libertarian diary of stuff I want to talk about. So you just you made, well, I don't even know how to put this. You did something insane, and you bought a business in the middle of COVID.
Yeah. So
yeah, you better explain yourself.
Yeah. So I was working for Warren Buffett. And
Satan, cool.
Yeah. So Berkshire Hathaway, and one of his presidents decided that I was no longer welcome there and canned my ass in the middle of COVID. And so I was running a $50 million business and blah, blah, blah. And then it was COVID and nobody was hiring, and so I had to make a decision, am I going to take the next job that comes around, or am I going to do something that I've always wanted to do, and that's run my own show? So I've run businesses for a couple of Fortune 500 companies and done really well, made other people millions of dollars. Now is the time for me to do it. So my partner and I, who ended up not buying the business together, but at the time we were looking, we ripped through like 50 different P&Ls of companies all across the country, trying to find the right company that we could implement our toolbox, in, and basically fix up and change the profitability profile of the company, basically. And came down to about 2 or 3, and one of them happened to be in Oklahoma. When the partner pulled out, then it came down to 2, because now I could only afford 2 of them by myself, and decided to go with the Oklahoma one, where we could keep our own house and keep the kids in the same school, and it's kind of a niche business, but profitable, really profitable, and would allow me to buy more businesses just because of the amount of work the owner had to do in this business. So we went after it. We're in manufacturing now. I make basically plastic liners that go inside of tanks that do chrome plating, metal finishing, chemical storage, and stuff like that, so that the tanks don't corrode. So it's a niche business, but it's also something that's never going away. There's manufacturing facilities all over the country. We sell all over the world, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, I always joke around now because all day long I'm using geometry and chemistry, which I haven't used since I was 15. That's all I'm doing now. It's like you come to me with a tank and I have to figure out how many square feet it is, and I have to figure out what kind of plastic to use with that chemistry. And so I know more about those two things than I have since I was in high school.
Yeah, that's funny. I know that a lot of people say, like, basically, for the majority of people, basic algebra is all you'll ever need. You don't even need to go past. I actually think that's true. But yeah, it's funny that once in a while you wind up in these weird positions when you're a business owner where you're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Do I remember how to do this?
The guy that's training me is like, how do you do area of a circle? I'm like, I don't know. Area of a circle. I haven't done that in 30 years,
That's funny. Well, I mean, that's ballsy to buy a business in the middle of COVID. That's a ballsy move.
It was tough. I mean, and I was surprised. I found a couple of banks that were like, yeah, no, you don't have enough money. You're not, you haven't done it before. You've run your other people's companies, but not your own. Then I found one bank, and you go out and you find these smaller banks that are willing to take a risk on you. And I found this one bank that's really awesome. We put 10% down is all we put down. I used my 401k money. Rob's transaction, blah blah blah. It's a tax-free event, and essentially leveraged a couple $100,000 to buy a couple $1 million business. And so I got it was pretty awesome the way it all worked out, and then I made sure I had $500,000 in the bank for cash flow because I knew COVID was going to be interesting.
It wasn't going to be 15 days slow spread.
What's that? It
wasn't going to be 15 days slow spread?
Yes, 15 days.
It's almost like a bunch of libertarians knew that. Not LP National, but a bunch of other libertarians knew that.
Well, and it really played into my favor, during the negotiations and whatnot, because it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. You know what I mean? And I was like, man, I don't know what's going to happen here. And so we ended up getting a great deal on it. The guy wanted out, and he made his money. He made fine money, but I got a good deal on the business and jumped in. And of course, I got nailed with some stuff. December, COVID hit our plant, and I lost $100,000 of my, hard-earned money out of nowhere. And then so I mean, there's things happen during COVID, but we planned it accordingly. I knew I had 6 or 7 months of cash reserve sitting there, so I could get through bad times. And now we're cooking. So,
well, that's awesome. And for anyone that watches this, you are always your best asset. I need people to understand that. No, but if you're working for someone else, it should always be to the goal of building a future where you work for you.
Yeah.
So, anyone needs to, I believe that everything that you do should always be designed to send you to a position where you only work for you.
I completely
get other people to work for you. You don't work for other people.
That's right. And I'm trying to build this portfolio out. And my thought is that my 4 kids will end up taking on this business if they want to, and then never have to work for anybody again if they want to. So that's the goal. And they're all under 8 years old right now. So I've got some time. I can lay this out for the next 10 or 15 years, and they can start taking over, at that point. And I'm pretty happy with where we're going.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I guess it's always fun to hear people talk about like the pitfalls of business, in my opinion, because we see a lot of people that for whatever reason think, oh, well, you're a business owner, so one, you're rich. That's not true.
No.
Generally, the business owner is the poorest one involved.
Yeah.
And also that like, oh, well, it's just easy. No, it's not. It's not easy. It's horrifying. You spend most of your time broke. You know, so I think it's good for young people to see the pitfalls, because it's like, look, this is what you should strive to be an employer, not an employee. But understand that it's not like, you know, the Democrats lie. Like, when they're like, oh, well, they're just rich and they just don't pay you because they're greedy. No, it's because they're broke. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
I talk to banks now and they're like, what's your net worth? And I'm like, the business. They're like, no, like outside the business. I'm like, the business.
The business. That's all the money I have.
I own the business and about $30,000 in my house. That's what I own right now. Like, so.
Yeah. That's funny. I got in some trouble one time on Twitter because I told people that if they couldn't afford to buy a house cash, they shouldn't buy one. And they were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I mean, if you're renting it and shit breaks, you don't have to pay for it. Like, makes more sense. And they're like, well, rent's more expensive. And I'm like, not long run. Trust me. It's not. Like, if you own a house and your water heater goes out, guess what? Ain't nobody coming to fix it for you.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think they should probably teach better, you know, along the way, or parents should focus on, is cash flow management, because until you start running a business, you don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, you're a marketing director or whatever, you have no idea about cash flow management. You're, you know, even when I was running a business for Berkshire Hathaway, if I lost $1 million, it wasn't like all of a sudden we went out of business. You know, Berkshire Hathaway had $500 billion in the bank. You know, they bail me out for $1 million. You know what I mean? but in this business, if I lose $100,000 in December, I'm like, well, hell, I can only do that about 2 more times. You know what I mean?
And then it's like game, set, match. Like, yeah, that's funny. So your podcast partner Kevin just got recently elected. He was up against a great guy who I highly respect. Rex is a great guy. Did that well, that, and he has like one of the worst jobs ever. Does that screw with your show, or do you guys have like you're pretty well set up for that kind of thing?
Yeah, we're fine. We so both Kevin and I were on the XCOM together, the executive committee together, last term, and we're both on it this term. So I got elected treasurer when he got elected chair. And so you know, I mean, being on the executive committee is a lot of work, right? You do more work than the average person, but it's still
See, I don't know. I don't do any of that. I'm a puppet master. I'm not the guy that does it. I just pay for other people to do it for me.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking 1 meeting a month, and then multiple kind of subcommittee meetings every month, and a lot of inter-party drama every week. You're going through different stuff, you know. And some really important stuff, trying to plan fundraisers and help the regions do their own thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the state kind of helps the regions do their thing. So there's a fundraiser going on this weekend. You know what I mean? And Kevin and I were helping out a little bit with that and trying to make sure they had the money, make sure they had the equipment and stuff like that. And so things like that. But for the most part, it's not like a 20-hour-a-week job. It's just that when something happens, he has to be on it. You know what I mean? So, so you are kind of on call at all times. You know, something bad happens, and he's the one. You know, he can farm it out, but he still has to be the one to farm it out. You know.
Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've had people ask me, well, why don't you run in your state? And I'm like, no, I'm more the guy that's like, dance for me, puppets. I don't want to. Well, I don't need to do that anymore.
One of the best conversations I ever had at the beginning of my trip to libertarianism was Larry Sharp, and I called him up, and he let me give him a call one time real early on. And he kind of laid it out for me. He goes, there's all different kinds of things you can do in this movement. And the important thing is to figure out where you fit and where you're going to be most effective. He said you can work with the state party. You can be a candidate. You can help a candidate. or you can just be an activist. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
every one of those has a lot of value to it. None of it is just an activist. You're an activist. There's a lot of value to all those different things. They said, and you can try them all and decide which one you like. And that's essentially what I've done. So,
I'll give it all a once over and see what fits, what I like. That's awesome.
Pretty much how I did it.
That's funny. So Oklahoma LP and in Kentucky LP have become my favorite, like very rapidly, because you guys just spit fire. You don't even care. You're like, whatever, we're bringing it. Like, and I know there's been some blowback, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into that part, but it is funny that both Kentucky and Oklahoma seem to have like just fire messaging.
Yeah.
Did you guys like hire some 15-year-old kid that just like to piss people off? Right. What happened?
Yeah. So, well, the messaging has improved quite a bit since Kevin took over, and that's nothing against Chad. Chad's fantastic chair. But Kevin just decided that, we're going to come out with messaging almost every day. It's going to be branded, so that we have the OKLP, signage up basically, and then words. Right. And it's just going to be sharp-tongued, sharp-witted, hard-hitting, not super controversial. So we always, if it's something controversial, we talk about it and just be like, okay, is this too bad? Is this hit? We had a couple things that were pretty close, but they hit you, and we've gone from like a couple thousand impressions a month to like 100,000.
Yeah. I've watched the shift. And it's crazy.
And it's just hard-hitting messages about what libertarians believe. And it kind of goes, so when I first started on Twitter with the libertarians, so I had a decent following as a Republican. I was kind of a super conservative guy. And when I moved to Libertarian and took on Libertarian In Chief, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. And what I did was I started sending out messages that said I was running for president. As president, I will do blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't running for president. It was just like, as president, this is what I would do. And I was basically taking things from the libertarian platform and making them easy to understand for people who weren't libertarians. You know what I mean? And people were responding so much, like my following was growing and they were getting retweeted to the point where I actually had to stop doing it because work was like, are you running for president or something?
You're like, no, man, no.
and I actually had to stop that format. But ever since then, I've kept my tweets up that way. And that's what Kevin's doing now, with the party. Is basically just bite size, easy to understand, even if you're not a libertarian. And maybe you don't agree, but this is what libertarians think on the issue,
Well, and I really appreciate that about there's a couple states that their state LPs putting that kind of messaging out there that like, look, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you like it or not, this is where we stand. And I think that's I personally like that because sure, you might turn a few people off or whatever, but it's, if you don't have conviction, what do you have?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, Kentucky's definitely one of the top ones. I think South Carolina, Texas, New Hampshire. There's some real good ones out there. Michigan every now and then comes in strong, So.
Yeah, but it kind of went from like Kentucky really setting things on fire to like now all of a sudden Oklahoma's like, hold my beer.
Yeah.
Got this thing. You know what I mean? And that's fun because it seems to me like it's almost back and forth in a way once in a while. Like, oh no, I can top that. Like we can do better.
When Kevin started that, I was like, all right, screw it. We're going to start the Oklahoma Mises Caucus one, and we're going to try it out, you, Kevin. So now the Oklahoma Mises Caucus Twitter is going after every issue.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that.
Twice as hard.
I've seen that. That's funny. We are going to take a quick pause here, and we will be right back in just a minute, everyone. And we're going to talk about the Mises Caucus because I do believe you are a Mises Caucus member. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and everyone can just hang on a minute. Sorry about that, everyone. My desk was trying to fall apart, and I had to fix it real quick. And I forgot to play the ad thing. Oops. Anyway, okay. Sorry about that, guys. So you are a member of the Mises Caucus. I know there's been some dust up, we'll call it that, over a lot of it came down to like Dave Smith's messaging and stuff like that, which he is definitely toned down on. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
But I never really had a problem with his messaging. I really liked the phrase, "We're bringing liberty to the Libertarian Party." I think that's great messaging, honestly.
Yeah.
Is that something that you and Kevin agree on, or how do you guys handle that, given your partnership in your your podcast and stuff? How's that work?
Funny because Kevin is a communist. I don't know if you knew that, but
Of course I knew that. I mean, obviously Kevin's a communist.
he was. He was a super socialist when he was younger. I was a ridiculously far right Republican when I was younger. We both
like
kind of
straight up neo-Nazi far right.
No, but like neocon for sure. You know what I mean? I was pretty tough neocon. I was kind of like, I was cheering the wars and stuff like that. I was about as far right as
Thanks for that, buddy.
Yeah. And and so we both kind of have come to libertarianism with very different angles. We disagree on a lot of how to do things, even if we agree on the issue,
Right.
He is not Mises at all. However, he's completely fair. And so he will listen to the Mises point of view. And he actually, again, agrees with most of what Mises has to say, just not necessarily with how we go about doing it. Kevin is very big on, Marxism is sold through emotions and getting people looped in on one idea and then kind of slowly indoctrinating them into other things. And he would like to see Libertarian Party kind of sell more on emotions. Mises is a little bit more of Austrian economics, hammering home the anti-war. We're pretty in your face, and that's not really Kevin's style. But that said, he we endorsed him for the chair race. So I mean, he was on our slate, and he's very open to listening to the Mises point of view. So we've had Angela McArdle, who is going to be the Mises chair candidate, on our show.
And full disclosure, I endorse her for LP chair. So
yeah, she's fantastic. I've known her for a good long time. She's fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm not a member of a caucus, but I endorse the one I think is best for the job. So.
Yep, and I should tell people, I mean, I was a Pragmatic Caucus guy for the first 2 years in the party. I am still a member of the Radicals, a paying member of the Radical Caucus, and I'm a state organizer for Mises. So I have nothing against any of the caucuses. I've been involved in almost
I'm flying all the flags.
Yeah, but at the same time, the reason I work so hard with the Mises Caucus is because I believe that they are doing the right things as far as recruiting. They're doing the right things as far as helping candidates run and win elections. A lot of people talk about that, but and they're growing like crazy. I mean, we have, the Radicals have 780 people on Twitter. The Prags have 800 people on Twitter. Mises Caucus has 22,000 people on Twitter.
They're burning and turning, man. I interviewed Rex. Well, I've interviewed him a couple times, but the first time I interviewed him, I thought he had the very best answer to it. He said, if you don't like what the Mises Caucus is doing, you better learn how to recruit.
Yeah.
Because that's all, those are your options. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just sit on Twitter and complain because these people are doing, and you're just complaining, and that's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah. And it's so important to realize, too, that we are recruiting the right way. And I think that people don't get that yet. And they get it as it comes to their state. You know what I mean? But before that, they just think that we're bringing in a bunch of Republicans, right? So when
there's nothing wrong with that.
And there wouldn't be anything wrong with that unless you're just bringing them in to get the votes and then they don't do anything afterwards. And
right, sure.
Which is what people thought we were doing, right? So Oklahoma, we came in, we went from 2 Mises guys to over 50. We brought about 18 of them to the convention. The convention had like 49 voting members, so we weren't even half. But we were so active and we worked across the lines and we talked with people. We won every single vote. There was not one vote that went against Mises. We got all 8 of our candidates elected. You know what I mean? And now they're all doing great things inside the party just a month in. And so what we did is we brought quality candidates and quality ideas and worked across the party lines. And nobody in Oklahoma right now, even though we went from 2 people on the executive committee to 7. So now we have 7 people out of 12. So we have the majority. Nobody would call that a takeover because of the way we did it. And that's how, if you go to these other states after it happens, people are like, yeah, you know what? These guys came to convention. They worked their asses off. They got their folks elected. And since then, they've still been working their asses off. And the people that haven't had their conventions yet, the Nevadas of the world, are out there talking about how terrible we are. But what they're going to see when the convention comes is a whole bunch of motivated people that are coming in wanting to change the party for the better.
Well, I'm not going to say anything bad about Nevada, but I will say I think a reckoning is coming to Nevada that I hope they enjoyed their stay. Let's put it that way. And I'm actively engaged in trying to make sure that their stay is short-lived. That has nothing to do with I don't call people bigots, and you won't get on my radar.
Yeah.
But when you're calling people terrible names that they don't deserve, and it gets on my radar, that's not that great for you long term. Anyway, so that aside, I agree with you. I've been watching I'm not a member of any caucus at all. none of them. I know there's like 1,907,000 of them or whatever. It doesn't matter. But I'm not a member of one. But I have reasons we can discuss after, in private as to why that is. But I got more engaged. So in 2020, in the beginning, and I know a lot of people that watch this know this, that the messaging over lockdowns infuriated me. And by that, I mean lack of.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm out. I don't care anymore. Like, whatever. And then I saw the Mises Caucus go, what are you doing? Like, and they're freaking out. And I'm like, okay, I kind of like this messaging. This is better, But then the Liberty Unity guys got involved, and they got Dave involved with them. And I was like, okay, I can get behind this again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe instead of disengaging, I can engage with these people and we can get somewhere. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, Todd. You had some struggle with that in the beginning, where you were like, bite me.
A Liberty unit. Yeah. I still have struggles with it. I still go toe to toe. I think I went head to head with David Fight the other day, and I love David. You know what I mean? But my point with it is I'll push for unity, But if you come at me, I'm allowed to have my own opinion, and I'm going to tell you what I think about you, especially if you're coming at me calling me a blank ist. You know what I mean? Then you can expect me to come at you pretty hard. And if you're being hypocritical, I'll come at you even harder, because that's my trigger. Hypocrisy just drives me insane.
Right.
So
that was one of the things that I really want to have you on the show. And some of my friends were like, well, he doesn't really support Liberty Unity. And I'm like, I don't think that that's true. I just think you all handle things a little different. But I have seen you kind of fire back a few times, and I found that interesting.
And that's going to happen. And I told these guys, I tell Kevin on the show, you know what I mean? I love Liberty Unity. I love what you guys are doing. That doesn't mean I'm going to support every time you tweet, and it doesn't mean I'm going to be nice all the time, because guess what? I've been an asshole for 20 years. It's going to be hard for me to get out of that mode.
It's going to be 20 more.
Yeah, exactly. It's the part that I like about Liberty Unity is we're all working towards the same goal, and that's great. And if everyone's working towards the same goal, I'm 100% on board. Yeah. As soon as you stop working towards the same goal, as soon as you'd rather call a libertarian a racist than a Democrat or a Republican, then sorry, you broke the Liberty Unity first, and I'll come back. You know what I mean? That's kind of how my head is. So
I got you on that. I do this fun thing that I like to do on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen it, well, you haven't seen it because you just barely followed me. No, but I do this fun thing where if a Democrat or a Republican says, oh, our democracy, I call them out and I tell them, I can guarantee in 5 questions, I can prove you don't support democracy. If you answer them honestly, you don't support democracy. I guarantee I can prove it. And I have a count. I'm not even kidding. 3,148 times I have not lost yet. Like ever. And I've had libertarians go, oh, do the test to me. And I'm like, no. Now, to be fair, I don't support, but I'll openly admit it. I'm like, no, voting's stupid. Like, I put 10 people in a room and 6 of you get to take all my shit away? No, that's dumb. Like, I'll openly admit that I don't support democracy. But these people are like, no, I do. No, you don't. I can prove it. So it's funny because it just worked in my head the same way. Like, don't call libertarians racist. Like, same thing. Like, I don't call the libertarians out that say they support democracy, because no, you don't. And it's the same thing. I'm not going to call them racist or whatever, even the ones that, it's really hard to deal with some of them. Like, I'm not a blocker, but I've had to mute. I don't block, but I've had to mute a couple because I'm like, I can't do this. Like,
I'm kind of the same way. And I will every now and then go at people for being racist. And it's because it's such a I hate that methodology, or the ideology, and it drives me insane. And you know what? When you're on Twitter that much and you're interacting with that many people, you're right. You've gotta for your own mental health, you've gotta either come back at them or mute them.
Yeah.
But you can't
Yeah. And
keep coming.
sometimes it's just better to just mute them.
Yeah, and you're
So
probably
you don't have to even deal with it, and you're like, oh, whatever, It does get a little irritating though, and like someone that you like highly respect or you're friends with is like arguing with someone, but you have them muted, so you can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, shit, now I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Do I unmute them? Because I probably muted them for a good reason. Like,
my rule is to try not to jump into those things because you almost always make it worse.
oh yeah, for sure. So I just try to stay out of it. So one of the things that I've been working on, and it's more behind the scenes, is I've been working with a lot of combat veterans recently, where we have I don't know if you saw why can I not man, I am brain dead. Dave Smith just did a great podcast with a veteran, and he had this great line where he said, if you support combat veterans, tell your government to stop making them. Yeah. It was an exceptionally, I mean, that is like, I wish I would have thought of that. You know what I mean? It is such a great line. But so I've been working behind the scenes with some combat veterans on some stuff, which I'll, maybe we could discuss in private. But the Libertarian Party has pretty much always been anti-war. Yeah. You get a couple of them that are like, well, they kind of had it coming. And I'm like, no, they didn't. Like, what are you talking about? So I had this situation where my mother, who I basically turned into an anarchist at this point, who lives in Sweden, she made this great analogy about good apples and bad apples when it came to cops, right? She made this great analogy where she said, well, one could argue that the 13 people that flew airplanes into the Twin Towers were just a few bad apples. And we bombed 2 countries for that. And I'm like, oh, I like that. And so I asked my wife, and she was like, you cannot tweet that. And I was like, no, but I can. Anyway, people got really pissed. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
even libertarians got really pissed about that one.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like the Holocaust tweets and the civil rights tweets and the 9/11 tweets. Those things are always going to get probably more negative attention than positive attention. Doesn't mean they're wrong by any stretch of imagination. I defended both of those. I probably would have defended yours. Like a thought behind it is correct. And sometimes that type of delivery is necessary to get the conversation started. And I'm okay with that, from a marketing standpoint, business owner standpoint, that if the conversation needs to get started, you always have to be careful not to lose the conversation, to the bad banter that comes afterwards.
Well, right. But that's what happened with Kentucky with their tweet. They lost, the conversation got lost in the nonsense. Yeah. And so we didn't get to have the conversation about the COVID passports, but I apologize for interrupting.
No, that's okay. And you're exactly right. So I defended Kentucky because I knew what they meant. Mm-hmm. And plus it wasn't a Holocaust tweet. It was a pre-Holocaust tweet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's all kinds of blah, blah, blah that you can, like they did it. They said what they said because they believed it and they were starting a conversation. And we started to have the conversation and then it started trending and went to hell. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It was actually 1,000 times better. If you remember that one, that was the vaccinated and unvaccinated water fountains.
Yes. Yes. And that was New Hampshire, was it?
What's that?
Was that New Hampshire that did that one?
Oh yeah. Who did I say?
I think it was New Hampshire that sent that one out, and because I remember seeing something, I think it might have been from Kevin, who was like, Kentucky has this great tweet, and now New Hampshire's like, hold my beer.
Yeah, yeah. Kevin didn't like it, and I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, this is perfect because because what the whole thing Kentucky was trying to say was two classes of citizens.
Yeah.
Right. New Hampshire,
which is true. I mean, that was 100% what their intent, I believe.
Right. Right, and New Hampshire nailed it. That's exactly
Yeah.
what New Hampshire said. It was word, like there's only one way to read that, unless you want to read it as racist, which of course a number of people wanted to read it that way after the Kentucky one, but I mean the message was clear and accurate, and so that I really liked that one. I mean, both of them said the same
thought
thing.
that one was a little better than Kentucky's, but I think both of them had the exact same messaging.
Well, and I think New Hampshire might have gotten away with it if Kentucky hadn't just done it. Because it just looked like they were, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Like that's, but here's my outlook on that is that I know a lot of people get upset about stuff like that and they say, oh, well, you're comparing or whatever. Yeah, but that's not a bad thing, in my opinion. Because it's recognizing history repeating itself. You know what I mean? That's the intent. That was Kentucky's intent, is to look at it like, hey, we've seen this in history. Let's not repeat that. Like, that doesn't sound fun. I don't know. I did find it hilarious that a whole bunch of not Jewish people got really offended.
Yeah.
And then the Jew people are like, I mean, all the way to, did you see the video or the photos from Israel where they were, and I'm like, just saying, y'all kind of owe Kentucky an apology now. But no, that's funny. I love that. So I guess, well, we have some very interesting things happening that you're familiar with Michael Malice, I assume.
Yeah.
And he uses this term a lot, right? The powers that be. They're coming apart at the seams, and it's hilarious because they don't know what to do. Like, so they're just lashing out in every direction, trying to like hang on to shit. And I could back this up with argument if necessary, but one of the funniest things that I saw was now the progressives are pissed at Biden because apparently he was supposed to allow a lot more refugees. And he's like, nah. Plus he's locking up all the brown people on the border, which I feel like Kamala Harris is super giddy about. I even tweeted that out. So what do you think this is just a natural progression of it falling apart, or is this like, what is happening?
Well, it's crazy because, and it's such a good time to be a libertarian, not to say that we're going to capitalize this because we have 50 years of history showing that we don't.
Proving that we don't.
But I mean, there has never been a time in my lifetime, and obviously I've only had, 10 presidential elections or so, but in my lifetime where
aging himself.
Where both parties are, split so hard. I mean, there's the MAGA, and then there is the anti-MAGA, whatever you want to call them. I hesitate
Lincoln Project
Republicans because a lot of them still aren't. You know what I mean? A lot of them are still ones, but and then there's progressives and the centrist Democrats. The Democrats that are more like, I wouldn't even call them centrist. I would just call them power hungry. And they realize that they can't be progressive to maintain power. They've got the back, and they know that if they stay, left center, they can keep it. So they're like the pragmatic Democrats, I mean, you've even had AOC, talk about how she might leave the party or do something different. You know what I mean?
She's not gonna.
No, she wouldn't. But I mean, just the fact that the break is that hard. And then you had Amash did leave the party, and stuff like that. So, I mean, you've had Amash. People forget that Amash was actually a big name before he left. You know what I mean? He was.
Yeah, he was.
Trump guys. So,
a lot of people continue. I remember people saying, "Oh, he'll be the new Ron Paul."
Yeah.
And then he was like, "Yeah, I'm out."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. I was on Jacob's team. And so I think we might have something to do with that, but but yeah, no, I mean, but the fact that the parties are breaking so hard, it just shows how fractured it is. I mean, we could really easily be in a situation where there's almost 5 parties going forward. Now,
Yeah.
what will really happen is there'll be 2 parties inside of Democrats, and one of them will win, and then be the Democratic nominee. That's how it'll actually play out. But there's always, probably from now on, there will always be this section of Democrats and section of Republicans that are pissed going into the election that we have a chance to go after, whereas that wasn't the case in the past.
Yeah. But I like the idea that they're fractured.
Yeah.
I keep telling people, I'm like, because a lot of people tell me, well, the Libertarian Party is never going to be the size of those 2 parties. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be. They're so fractured. All we've got to do is pull on the thread.
Yeah.
And just pull them apart.
Yeah. One of the ideas that I had spouted off during my very brief chair run was this idea of the signing day, where basically every state is responsible to go after every lawmaker who's kind of on the edge with their party, and not happy with their party, and try to get them on July 4th every year to have X number of people move over to Libertarian. You can find people who lost the governor race, but they're still a state senator, you know what I mean? And they're pissed at their party. Or you can find a 68-year-old who's not going to run.
Or again. Like their party just destroyed them on purpose because they weren't the one that was supposed to win.
Right, exactly. Or they tried to run a primary person against them and they still won. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a handful of those in every state. And we
Eric Breakies of the world.
Yeah, we could get them to move over. And then they become fantastic future, gubernatorial candidates and whatnot for us because they've had the electoral experience and they've ruled as a libertarian. And it's not like we're finding people that aren't libertarian. There are plenty. I know we all hate to admit it. There are plenty of Liberty Republicans.
There are. That's true.
There are 1 or 2 Liberty Democrats out there.
You've got Thomas Massey. You've got Rand Paul. You've got, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to work with. Let's put it that way.
And when you get down into the state house and the state senate, there's even more.
A lot more.
As corrupted as the federal candidate. So
so
there's those guys. I mean, I remember I tried to work for a Republican in Michigan one time. I tried to get his chief of staff job, and his big deal was like, he was a super liberty Republican. He wanted no helmet laws. He wanted no licensing. All this stuff. I mean, those were his big issues. And I remember at the time I was a neocon, and I'm like, you've got to have better issues to fight than, a helmet law. Like, what the hell is this? And now I look back and I go, I mean, he was actually fighting for liberty. Like, whether it's a smart liberty idea,
he was legit.
It was just interesting now looking back, because I remember thinking, like, if I get this job and this is my number 1 issue, like, how embarrassing is that? Like, shouldn't he be all wanting to kill all the Iraqis or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, now you go back and you're like, man, I should have fought harder for that job.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
Learned something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember like Ron Paul 2008, right?
Yeah.
And him calling out the war and everything it was one of the debates or whatever, and he got booed, and he didn't even care. He was like, whatever. Yeah. And then was it like 2012? Whatever. The next campaign, he did it, and he got cheered.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that debate clip is so funny to watch if you watch it, because they cheered him, and it was like, I feel like that was South Carolina or someplace. Like, I mean, it wasn't.
I think it was. It was like Neocon Central.
Yeah, it was not a place where that should have been cheered. And then on top of that, I think the next person who talks in that video is Gary Johnson, who at the moment was running as a Republican, dropped out shortly thereafter and became the Libertarian nominee. But they had 2 guys on the stage making the same points in a Republican primary and getting cheered for it. You know what I mean? And this is how far the Republicans have swayed. You know what I mean?
They're just like, oh, stimulus checks.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they still call themselves conservatives, and we're like, since why? What?
Like
what are you talking about? Like, what is happening?
They may as well put Christian in front of it, because that's essentially what they are now. Is they're the Christian conservative. They fight.
They're not even that anymore, dude. Like, they're not even that. Like, they don't even have that argument to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, whatever. Like, I don't care. Like, look, I'm a Christian, but I don't need to be like pushing my crap in your face. Like, whatever, that's me. That's my thing. Whatever. I'd rather me be wrong than you be wrong, honestly. Like, but no, man, I don't know. Like, it's interesting to see the shift. Like we discussed, Michael Malice, I think, has it perfect when he says that conservatives are just progressives with speed limits.
Yeah.
When it comes to Republicans, because they are, I have started to see some of that start to happen to the Libertarian Party. And I don't like it. I'm like, crap. But I also think that if used correctly, it can be very beneficial. One of the things that I'm super focused on, hyper focused on right now, as far as my work in the Libertarian Party, is I want to elect county sheriffs.
Yes.
That's I don't care about council. I don't care about mayor. I don't care about, sheriffs.
Yeah.
Because all your laws are just unicorns and rainbows if you don't have the enforcement branch.
Yeah.
And the county sheriff, as an elected official, literally has the power to tell city cops, shove it.
Yeah.
Not doing it, and you're not allowed to do it, and I won't allow it. So that's my whole focus now of elected officials. I'm hyper focused on just sheriffs.
Well, I think it's really cool because, those are the guys who have been successful in putting in, even if it is not official, but putting in things like the Second Amendment sanctuaries, and things like that. And they can do it just by not acting. You know what I mean? And so they
just
don't declare it. They can just say, you know what? Guess what? We're not going to pull people over for having expired tags.
Right. Well, and
your time.
Let's see. We got a question for you here. Well, that's a statement. Oh, shit. I know who this is. Okay. Can non-police be elected sheriff? Yes, they can. Absolutely. Anyone can be elected sheriff. Anyone can run. Anyone can be elected. That has no bearing in anything. No, I am hyper focused on sheriffs because I believe that gives you a very good run.
Yep.
Where people can go, well, what about crime, right? Because that's what they're going to say. Like, well, if you're not going to arrest people for drugs and you're not going to arrest them for this, and you're going to, okay, well, let's see if that causes a problem. And when it doesn't, they're going to be like, oh, I don't understand. What happened? It's like, well, you've been abused. That's what's been happening. You know what I mean?
So I made a post on Twitter the other day about this, about like what you would do if you wanted to actually fix some of these policing problems. And this is something a sheriff could theoretically do. And this isn't, the actual solution, but it's just a business person's thought on how you fix this type of issue. So the first thing you do is you stop arresting people for the victimless crimes, right? So now all of a sudden you've got 50% more time. Right. You have 50%.
Sure, where there's people are being harmed.
Right. So the next thing you do is you cut 50% of the cops because you have 50% more time. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you do is you double their salary and you keep your budget the same. And all of a sudden what you have is you have a situation where cops, the jobs are now twice as desirable. So you get twice as good applicants, but you only have to hire half as many. So now instead of a whole bunch of mediocre cops, you have just a handful of really good cops. And instead of enforcing a whole bunch of ridiculous laws, you're enforcing just the laws that matter. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden you're running it like a business would. Like you're not, you don't have to go after the 1,000 customers that make up 10% of your business, and you don't have to go after, and use terrible suppliers just because you're trying to come up with a product that you don't want to sell anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's ways that a sheriff could make such a big difference, even without all that. But just little changes that could completely change how they're interacting with the public and de-risk so much of what we're seeing.
Yeah, one of the things that I had someone ask me, why are you going to target sheriffs and not police chiefs? And I said, police chiefs are hired, sheriffs are elected.
Yep.
And also there are 18 Supreme Court cases in precedent that say that the sheriff is the highest law enforcement official in his county, no matter who's there.
Yep.
So that tells me, even if you have city cops and they violate stuff, right? The sheriff can go in and say, no. And they actually, in most counties, I learned this, I didn't know that, but I learned it, can deputize the entire city police force in his county and be like, well, you're all deputies and now you work for me. So you're either all fired or you do the job I tell you to do.
Right.
Like, that's it. They can do that. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm like, okay, well, sheriff is where we need to focus our energy. If we can get a bunch of super libertarian sheriffs, then it doesn't even matter who everybody else is, because it's like, pass all the dumb shit laws you want, like unicorns and rainbows, baby.
Another cool thing about the sheriff races, and I don't know the stats on this, but I've lived in enough different cities to know that most of the time, or many of the time, the sheriff races actually go unopposed. The person who's the sheriff just keeps winning as the sheriff. They don't have any serious competition or no competition at all.
It's because it's just red or blue.
Yeah, well, and those are and even most of them that I've been in don't even have the competition. They're just they're not going to win, so they don't win. It doesn't pay enough. There's no notoriety. There's not enough corruption. It just doesn't pay to put somebody in that position. Like the red and blue use their good candidates to run for other stuff. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so those one-on-one races is when you really get to get your ideas out there, and you can influence the other person. So if I go out and I run against a neocon sheriff, and people start to like my ideas, he's going to have to adopt some of those, to win. And so you can win even by losing in a scenario like that.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about the idea of targeting sheriffs is, like you just said, the majority of the time, sheriffs are never challenged.
Right.
Once you become the sheriff, you're the sheriff. No one ever challenges you. So it's the only person on the ballot is the sheriff.
Yeah.
That's not that hard to put that sheriff down. We have a question for you here, Todd. So let's.
Can you outsource investigations? Is that legal?
I'm gonna let you answer.
You may know more than me, but I would assume that you're allowed to outsource investigations. So.
All investigations are outsourced in one way or another. It is absolutely legal if you think about professional witnesses, legal witnesses, medical examiner, any of that. That's all outsourcing of an investigation. That's what they do. It makes no difference who does it. The police can even outsource part of their investigation. This was ruled in 1978. The U.S. Supreme Court said I think it was Anchorage. I think Cartwright. I could be wrong. The Anchorage Police Department had hired a private investigator, and the Supreme Court said that was actually acceptable. So yes, you can outsource investigations. At least under legal law, I believe that you can. I don't think you should. I think that's stupid, but whatever. But cops are lazy. What do you want?
What might be good is to outsource investigations on cops.
Yeah, that might be a good idea. That might be a good idea. Can we start doing that? That would be good. So Okay, well, we're coming up. We're just over an hour now. But I did have one other thing that was in my head, and now it's not coming out of my mouth. Shit. I don't know. Talk about something funny while I think about it. Come on.
I got a lot of people all worked up today talking about the shooting in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I don't know if you saw that.
Which was that the young boy or?
No, this was actually Briarwood Mall started the trend on Twitter, and I was like, Briarwood Mall, I know that place. I used to work there, and I, of course, you know right away why you think it's trending. So you click, and of course, there's a shooting there. And so I go onto Facebook and I go onto Twitter, and there's like, 7 people dead, blah, 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 mall shooting, mass shooter, this and that. And Ann Arbor, if you're not familiar, is like the bluest city in Michigan other than Detroit. But it's like the super liberal blue, like the I'm really rich and I care about poor people, but I've never met kind of blue.
But I've never met one.
So, and like that's Ann Arbor. And I grew up there, and it was terrible for me from a political perspective. I actually ran for city council when I was 20 there as a Republican, and it was just, it was crazy.
So you got like 0.009% of the vote?
Of the vote, but I was riding on Bush's coattails at the time, so
nice.
Yeah. But anyway, the point is when I going on Facebook and Twitter, like everyone's going crazy. Then even after they come out and say, "Oh, only one person got shot, they didn't die. It wasn't a mass shooter. It was a targeted, this or that." People are still like gun control, gun control, gun control, and I started coming out after them and being like, guys, this is the most Ann Arbor thing I've ever seen. You guys literally have one murder a year.
Yeah.
In a city of 120,000, that's 85% lower murder rate.
That's lower than Switzerland, which has the lowest murder rate in the entire world.
I'm like, you have one murder a year. This person didn't even die. You know what I mean? You all blew it up out of proportion so that you could get in the news, so that you guys could finally be the victim, because Ann Arbor never is, And now people are like, all over Facebook, like freaking out. And now I'm scared to go out in public. And I'm like, guys. And so anyway, I pissed off a whole lot of friends, family, and otherwise, and
good.
on Twitter by speaking out and just being like, you guys got to calm down. This is not because 5 people got scared in a Von Maur, store. We don't take away rights from 300 million people. And by the way, let's stop calling shootings of 2 people mass shootings. We don't call.
Well, that's not going to really be possible when they're trying to do. Like, I don't know if you saw. Oh shit, I can't remember which one it was, but they tweeted something like, "We got to get rid of like silencers because then you can't hear the weapon." And I'm like, "Oh my god." And this was like a sitting congressperson.
Well, right? If you heard the weapon, you could duck, right?
Yeah. But she was like, well, you can't hear it, and so it's dangerous. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you don't know dick about guns and or accessories.
Yeah.
It might be called a silencer. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't silence anything. You're just stupid, and you don't know anything about firearms. Like, so one of the things that I want to do is I want to put on a firearm safety course on my family ranch, right? Yeah. And I own some weapons that required heavy federal licensing for me to own.
Okay.
No offense to the libertarians, but I wanted to own them, and so I own them, and that's the way I had to do it in that time. Yeah. But what I want to do is put on an event where people can come and shoot these weapons that if you were to just like get one out of the trunk of a car, you're probably going to wind up in federal prison.
Right.
But you can still come shoot it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
It would be fun.
So that's one of those things that it's like, I catch hell. I don't know if you've ever run into this problem, but I catch hell because they're like, oh, you got all the federal licenses. And I'm like, well, yeah. Because the way to get people to understand, like I have made a lot of people that were anti-gun very pro-gun by taking them shooting.
Right. Yeah.
Like once they do it, they're like, oh shit, that's awesome. Well, I want to keep doing that.
I love it. That's the first question I always ask when people are, going off on AR-15s and whatnot. I say, have you ever, shot one? Because, and the answer is always no, you know what I mean? And it's like,
it's really fun.
Yeah, because I mean, then I always forget this reporter's name, but I'm sure you remember kind of the story when the reporter wrote this story about firing an AR-15 because he was like, the kickback was so violent, and I'm like, on an AR-15? I'm like, little kids can shoot AR-15, like it's designed to be really.
I don't remember his name, but I do remember that story, and he's like, I got PTSD.
Yeah, PTSD. It was so loud and so violent, and I'm like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, I mean, you shoot a shotgun; it's about 100 times louder and 100 times more violent than an AR-15, and people, let their kids.
A 1911 Colt 45 is scarier. Like, what are you talking about, bro? Yeah, I do. I remember the story. I don't remember the guy's name. I know everyone made fun of him. Yeah. Even people on the left that are pro Second Amendment, but they're those people.
Right.
We're like, what? Yeah. Like, you can hold an AR-15 with one hand and shoot it. Like, it's not even a thing. It doesn't have a kick. It's a 223 round. Or 7.76, whatever. There's no kick to an AR-15. What are you talking about?
I mean, the whole point is
I have a Barrett 50 caliber. You want to get PTSD? Shoot that, you pussy. that thing will put you backwards. You know what I mean? That's hilarious. I do remember that story though. That was really funny. When I remember seeing it, going,
yeah.
Okay.
I think I might have read it. Like I didn't shoot an AR-15 till maybe 16 for the first time, 2016. You know what I mean? I was a shotgun guy before that, and I would do clay shooting and stuff like that. And I shot one, and I was like, wow, this is like super easy. Like,
yeah,
a lot of fun.
There's nothing to it.
It's like almost impossible to miss. It's like,
yeah. That's one of the things that like a lot of people say, oh well, AR-15 is not a good home defense weapon. And I'm like, what do you think they should use? And they're like, well, they make pistols. And I'm like, Jesus, you know nothing about guns. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm serious. Like, look, I understand weapons to a point that most people will never understand them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you've ever dealt with like a warrant officer in the military or whatever, these people will tell you flat out, no, you want a rifle.
Yeah.
When Joe Biden says, get a shotgun, I'm like, why? I don't want to blow a hole through my wall. What the hell's wrong with you? You know what I mean? No. A rifle is a perfect self-defense weapon, especially in a home. Yeah. And an AR-15 is, first of all, it was designed to be a not or less than lethal weapon. I mean, people should read up on that. You know what I mean? No, they're great weapons for home defense. Now, I, knowing how to handle firearms, use a much like okay. So I'll put it this way: I put out a tweet the other day that said, how odd do you think they would find it to find out that an AR-15 is not in the top 10 most lethal weapons that I own? Just saying, I do what I want.
Yeah.
But it's because they don't know anything about guns.
Yeah. I put out a poll the other day asking people, what they use for their self-defense, because everyone was like, no one uses an AR-15 for self-defense. That's one of the big lines. And it was awesome. I mean, AR-15 won. I don't know if it should or shouldn't or whatever, but it won. And everyone was exactly right. Like, they're easy to hold. They're lightweight. They're easy to aim. they don't kick. You know what I mean? You don't miss by 5 feet and then take 5
I think they're probably the number one self-defense weapon now.
Yeah.
In the home. In the home. Not in the street, but in the home for sure.
Yeah. And everyone, and everyone's.
Why
and
wouldn't
that's
they
what
be?
it was home security, and everyone, and the people that were against it were like, the bullets travel too far, and your neighbors are at risk, and this and that. And I'm like, guys, there's somebody coming at you with a gun. Like, you want a gun that shoots them. That's the point of having a home defense weapon. Now, me personally,
the people saying your neighbors are at risk also don't understand firearms, because a 223 or 556, whatever, it's probably not going all the way through the body, and even if it does, it isn't going through a wall.
Right. Yeah.
It's just not high enough caliber. It's just not going to work.
Now, me personally, I'm fine. I just like my shotguns. That's how I've always been. I've used them longer. I'm more comfortable. I can shoot a shotgun in the dark and hit what I'm aiming at. You know what I mean? Like, I use a shotgun. And my wife has a handgun, and she probably won't use it, and that's too bad. You know what I mean? Like, she knows how, but I don't think she would. Like, I think it would end up.
Yeah. I think a lot of people like the shotgun because it's just point and pull the trigger, and it doesn't really matter. Well, whatever's in its way is probably going to get like messed up.
And I bought 2 semi-autos, you know what I mean? And one of them's a 20 gauge for her. So, and that's still going to kill a person. You know what I mean? You get them twice at least, it's going to kill them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're not going to.
And I just told her, I said, if you ever grab this thing and there's somebody there, I said, pull the trigger until it doesn't pull anymore.
Yeah. I mean, my self-defense weapon, even in my home, is not a rifle. It's not a shotgun. It's a handgun. But I'm in a different position than most people.
Yeah.
Like, my training, my muscle memory is way different than most people. And so, I've had people ask me, and I guess this is where we'll finish up the conversation. I've had people ask me, why is it that cops are such bad shots? And I'm like, because they don't have any training.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah.
They, like, Magnus and I discussed this. New York City straight up came out and said openly, it's more expensive to train the cops than it is to pay the lawsuits.
Yeah.
That is a problem.
Yeah.
That people don't seem to understand. And so my training was much different. Like, the money in training is worth it.
Right.
So that you don't have the outside issue.
Yeah.
Cops don't get that, and they don't do it themselves either, which is, I think, personally irresponsible on their part. But whatever.
I mean, if you can pick up a taser and not realize, or pick up a Glock and not realize it's not a taser, then you probably haven't been shooting your Glock enough, right? It's like
or taser.
Or a taser, yeah. It's like, I mean, even Pat Robertson is like 95, and he's on the show, like, showing the 2 things, like, these nothing.
Yeah.
Alike.
My favorite meme was like, cop, sandwich, gun, cop, like, cell phone, gun. It's like, fucking taser, gun.
Yeah.
or then it showed a gun and it was like taser.
Yeah. I put out one. I said, Republicans want you to believe, everything the cops say. And I said, except taser, 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 because I believe that. Like, we just got that proven wrong.
Oh, man. I hate the tribalism. I think that's what drives me insane the most, because that most people are like, dude, that's not right. You know what I mean? Like, it's so dumb. Like, I don't know that lady needs to go to prison. I'm not gonna say that, but I mean, she definitely shouldn't have been a cop if you don't know the difference between the weapon.
Well, the screwed up thing about this is, she was a 26-year veteran, she was a former police union chief. You know what I mean? Like she's not. I mean, like if this
She's
is
not new.
if this is the bad cop, then I wonder how many good cops there are in that department. You know what I mean? Like
It's
you
like,
got
oh my God.
It's like
Yeah, Magnus, he tweeted out something like it was like cop tries to shoot dog for barking and shoots himself. And I was like, look, we found a good apple.
yeah, exactly.
Oops.
That was probably, he's one of the 80.
That's funny. All right, so that's where we are going to have one final question, and then we are going to wrap this thing. Joe Biden has tapped one of the most sociopathic people on planet Earth to run ATF. I stand behind that statement, and I will challenge anyone to any debate, anywhere, at any time to prove me wrong. Please tell me your thoughts on this.
Is this not the fella who has that awesome picture of him like beaming while he's standing on Waco's ashes? Is this that guy?
That would be that psychopath. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the equivalent of picking one of the military guys who, got photographed holding the head of a Taliban guy. It's the equivalent of that, except that.
Well, I would actually say it's worse because these are U.S. citizens.
Exactly, except it's an American. So I mean, it's absurd that he still works for the government. Okay.
Well, no, he didn't. He was retired, and then he was working for a super anti-gun pack or group or whatever. And then he got tapped. So
well, that makes sense. I mean,
they're trying to bring him back to work for the government.
Yeah, well, I mean, lobbyists are always the best people to put in charge of government.
I mean, obviously. Duh.
Oh man. Yeah.
What are your actual thoughts though, like as far as like this guy? Because when I saw that this was a sociopath that they had nominated for this job, I mean, first of all, not only is he just crazy, but he also is a horrifying liar. He said that he in a Reddit AMA said like, oh, they shot down 2 Texas Air National Guard choppers with a 50 BMG. That never happened.
No.
It was so bad of a lie that when it came out, that the actual Texas Air National Guard was like, that never happened. Like, what are you talking about? This guy he's fucking insane. I'm not even like, nut job. Don't care. I don't know. I tweeted out like, if these Republicans let this sycophant take over the ATF, every one of them should just resign in disgrace for cowardice.
Yeah.
I don't know what it takes to block it. I don't know when there's only 50 of you. I don't know how that works. They need to figure it out.
Well, and you would think that there's at least 2 Democrats who would step up, and I mean
I think Joe Manchin would probably step up. Honestly.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like you got to think that somebody would understand this, and it's. I mean, the problem.
Someone would understand. Like this dude took a picture over dead bodies of children. Yeah. We cannot let him run this thing.
Right. Well, not only that, but he made the ATF at the time, that powerful. He was part of the ATF being that powerful, and regardless of what you think about the ATF or not, it's not as powerful anymore, right? Like after that happened, after a couple other things happened, they don't get
brutalized him.
Nobody's like, oh shit, hostage situation, let's get the ATF involved. Like nope. Nobody wants to do that anymore.
No, because they're gonna light the building on fire, and that's not good.
It's like, I mean, the FBI is bad enough, and the other folks are bad enough, but they're not about to get the ATF in the news again, And so, I mean, this guy, I don't know why you would take this huge step backwards. I don't understand. I mean, Biden, comes in and he says he actually has done good to say, I'm not going to appoint the crazy progressives to these posts for the most part. You know what I mean? There were always, let's put it this way, there were always worse choices he could have, you know, except for this one. And why?
Yeah. No, why? What are you doing?
Yeah. What is it? I mean, like, and he was the author of the crime bill. You know, he's done all this stuff in the past that kind of leads him to having some crazy asshole in this job, and he's just playing right into it. And I don't understand it.
I don't think he's actually doing it, honestly. I don't think Joe Biden knows what the hell's going on.
And
to
does
be
kind of
honest,
seem like the Kamala move, doesn't it?
yeah. Well, top cop is probably top. You know, cop Mala. So that said, as far as cop Mala goes, anyone that sees this, look up Olivia Ronda on Twitter and YouTube and check out her cop Mala thing. It's hilarious. She basically like ruined her hair to pull this game off, and it's super funny, and y'all should watch it. Todd, this has been awesome, bro. I've really appreciated you coming on the show. We'll have to try to do it again another time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, tell the people where to go again, where to follow you, how to throw your grift, bro. Throw your grift.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't have a ton of different places. Pretty much Twitter is where to follow me most often. So at Todd Hagopian, and then the LP Mises Caucus of Oklahoma. I'm one of the few people that run that account too. And then I'm on Facebook, Todd Hagopian for Corporation Commission, which was a run that I did this last cycle. I still have that page up and interact with people there.
Nice. Well, everything's in the description for Todd, for his podcast, and him as a person. To all of you can check that out. Follow him there. Yeah, it's usually pretty funny. Sometimes he irritates me, but that is the fun part about being in our circle. So
I always tell people, if you agree with anybody 100% of the time, you're not applying enough critical thought. So I should be pissing you off at least 10% of the time.
Yeah, I'll give you like 20% of the time, but I appreciate it because I'm like, oh, well, maybe it'll make me think about stuff. So, dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate it. Y'all, peace.
Yeah, thanks.